Let me tell you about the day I stopped underestimating humans. Not because of a battle, not because of some big speech. It happened in a classroom, a boring one, the kind with hard seats and bad lighting and a teacher who talked like he was being paid by the syllable. It happened because of a girl who never raised her hand. Her name was Wren. And by the time that day was over, every single one of us, 43 students from 11 different worlds, would never look at a human the same way again. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really started. My name is VEYL. I come from a world called OTHRUN, third moon of a gas giant most of you have never heard of and never will. We're a careful people, quiet. We measure things twice. We don't shout, we don't brag, and we definitely don't pick fights. Our whole culture is built around one idea: survive by being smart, not strong. So when I got accepted into the Concord Academy, my parents cried. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind where your whole family suddenly believes the future is real. The Concord Academy sits on a station called Tarsus Reach. Picture a wheel, a huge one, big enough that you could fit a small city inside it, and they basically did. The station spins slow and steady, and that spin is what gives you weight under your feet. You stop noticing it after a week, but on your first day, you feel it. You feel the floor pushing up against you, and you feel the stars sliding past the windows, and your stomach does this little flip every time you look out. I remember my first morning there. I pressed my face to the window in the dorm corridor and just watched. There was a freighter docking far out, all lit up, slow as a sleeping animal. There were maintenance drones drifting past like little glowing fish, and behind all of it, the war. You couldn't see the war from the station. Not really, but you could feel it. Everybody could. The Concord had been fighting the VASS for 9 years by then. 9 years, that's most of my childhood. The VASS weren't even a single species. They were a collective, a kind of swarm state that ate worlds and didn't apologize for it. The Concord held the line. Barely. Every few months there'd be news of a planet evacuated, a fleet lost, a border pulled back. And we were the kids being trained to take over when the current generation ran out. No pressure. The academy mixed everyone together on purpose. The idea was simple. If you're going to fight beside someone, you should know them first. So they jammed us into shared classes, shared dorms, shared everything. 11 species in one building, all learning the same things, all pretending we weren't terrified. My class had the usual mix. There were the KORRITH, big, four-armed, built like walking furniture. Proud. Loud. They came from a warrior tradition that went back 10,000 years, and they let you know it about every 6 minutes. There were the SELV, tall and thin and pale, who could see in spectrums the rest of us couldn't, and who looked at you like they already knew how you were going to die. There were a couple of my own kind, the OTHRUNI, sitting in the back taking notes, keeping our heads down. Old habits. And then there were the humans. 3 of them, just 3. You have to understand, at that point, humans were new. The Concord had only made contact with Earth about 15 years before the war started, and humanity had spent most of that time as a quiet, minor partner. Useful, sure, hard workers, good engineers, but nobody thought of them as soldiers, not really. There was an old joke about humans back then. People said they were the species that brought a knife to a star fight. Meaning, brave but outmatched. Meaning, sad almost. The little guys who tried too hard. 2 of the 3 humans in my class fit that picture, honestly. There was a boy named Thomas who laughed too loud and talked too much and clearly wanted everyone to like him. There was a girl named Priya who was sharp and funny and ran the social side of the dorm like a captain runs a ship. And then there was Wren. Wren Callowy. I want you to picture her because the picture matters. She was small, not weak small, just compact, the kind of person who folds into a chair and disappears. She had brown hair she kept tied back in a way that looked like she'd done it without a mirror because she probably had. She wore the same gray jacket almost every day, zipped up to the chin, sleeves pulled down over her hands. She sat in the corner, back row far side next to the window, every class, same seat. And she never said anything. I mean that. In the first 2 months, I don't think I heard Ren speak more than 20 words total. She answered when a teacher called on her, in short, flat sentences, and then she went quiet again. She didn't go to the social nights. She didn't join the study groups. At meals, she sat at the end of a table with a tray and a tablet and she read. Some of the others thought she was stuck up. The KORRITH decided she was scared of them, which delighted them, because the KORRITH loved being scary. I thought she was lonely. I felt a little sorry for her, honestly, which is embarrassing to admit now. Me, feeling sorry for her. But here's the thing I noticed, even back then. The thing that should have been a warning. Ren never flinched. You learn to read people fast when you grow up careful. And in a room full of nervous teenagers, everyone flinches. Someone drops a tray, everyone jumps. A drill alarm goes off, everyone tenses. A KORRITH slams a fist on a desk to make a point, half the room jolts. Ren didn't. Not once. A tray would clatter to the floor right behind her, and she wouldn't even turn her head. The drill alarms would scream, and she'd just keep reading, slow, calm, like the sound was happening on another station entirely. I told myself she was just zoned out, lost in her own world. I was wrong about almost everything. The first crack in the picture came about 10 weeks in, combat theory class. Now combat theory was a class everyone secretly loved, even the quiet ones, because it was the only class where we got to feel like real soldiers instead of kids doing homework. The teacher was a retired officer named Instructor DAKU, a KORRITH, old, SCARRED, missing 2 fingers on one of his lower hands. He'd actually fought the VASS back in the early years and survived, and you could tell because he didn't bother showing off. He'd seen the real thing. He didn't need to. That day, DAKU put a tactical simulation up on the big display. A frozen moment from a real battle, 3 years old. A boarding action. VASS forces had breached a conquered cruiser, and the recording showed the corridor fight, paused at the worst possible second. Tell me, DAKU said, walking slow in front of the class, what this soldier did wrong. The display showed a conquered Marine, frozen mid-motion, weapon up, 3 VASS closing in. It looked hopeless. The Marine was cornered, 1 in front, 2 coming from a side passage. The KORRITH students went first because of course they did, big confident answers. He should have held the doorway. He should have fallen back to the junction. He exposed his flank. DAKU just nodded and said nothing, which was his way of telling you that you were wrong without wasting words. A SELV student spoke up, cool and precise. He should not have engaged. The position was lost. He should have sealed the bulkhead and sacrificed the section. Sacrifice the section, DAKU repeated, and the 4 wounded crew behind him. The SELV shrugged. Acceptable loss. DAKU looked at the room. Anyone else? And that's when it happened, quiet from the corner. He didn't do anything wrong. The whole class turned, 40 heads all at once, because that voice we barely recognized it. It was Ren. She wasn't even looking up from her tablet at first. Then she did. She looked at the screen and her eyes moved across it fast, the way you'd read a page you already knew. Explain, said DAKU, and I'll never forget there was something in his voice. He wasn't humoring her. He was actually curious. Ren put her tablet down. He's not cornered, she said. Everyone thinks he's cornered. He's not. Look at the deck. The gravity plating in that corridor is damaged. You can see the warning strip, the yellow one, on the floor behind him. He backed up to it on purpose. DAKU said nothing. He turned and looked at the screen. So did all of us. There was a yellow strip on the floor, faint, I hadn't even noticed it. The two coming from the side passage have to cross that strip to reach him, Ren went on. Her voice was flat, not nervous, just explaining. Damaged plating means unstable gravity. When they step on it, even for a second, their footing's gone. They'll overcorrect. Vasts are fast, but they're top-heavy. When they move quick, they lean into a charge. They'll stumble. She tapped the edge of her desk once. So he's not trapped between three enemies. He's about to be facing one enemy, plus two who are falling over. He took the worst position in the corridor on purpose, because it's the only spot where the room does half his work for him. The class was dead silent. Daku stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he reached over and pressed a control, and the simulation started moving. We watched. The Marine fired at the one in front. The two from the side passage charged across the yellow strip and stumbled, exactly like she said. Footing gone, leaning too far into the rush, going down hard. The Marine pivoted and finished them on the floor before they could recover. The recording ended. The Marine was still standing. The four wounded crew behind him still alive. Nobody said anything. Daku turned around very slowly and looked at the corner of the room, at the small girl in the gray jacket, who had already picked her tablet back up. "Miss Calloway," he said, "how did you know about vast charge mechanics?" And Ren, without looking up, said the thing that should have told us everything. She said, "I read about it." That was all. I read about it. And she went back to her tablet and the conversation was over. But I was watching Daku's face. And Daku, this old soldier who'd fought the real war, who didn't flinch at anything, Daku looked at her like he'd just seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Like a man who's reached into what he thinks is an empty box and felt something move. After that I started watching Ren, not in a creepy way, in a careful way, the Othruni way. I just paid attention. And once you start paying attention to someone, you can't stop seeing the things you missed. Like how she sat. I always thought she folded into her chair because she was shy. But that's not it. If you really looked, she always sat where she could see the door. Always. Every classroom, every meal, every common room. She'd drift to whatever seat let her watch the entrance, and she'd put her back to a wall, and she'd do it so smoothly you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. Like how she ate, fast, efficient. She'd finish a meal in about 4 minutes even when there was no reason to rush. Like eating was a task to complete, not a thing to enjoy. Like somewhere in her past, slow eating had been a luxury she couldn't afford. Like her hands. She kept her sleeves pulled down, like I said. But one time in the corridor she reached up to grab a handhold when the station did one of its little gravity shutters, and her sleeve slid back, and I saw her wrist for half a second. There was a scar there, a real one, pale and thick and old, running up under the fabric, not the kind of scar you get falling off a bike, the kind you get from something that was trying very hard to kill you. I didn't say anything. You don't where I'm from, but I filed it away. The Korath were the ones who pushed it. Of course they were. There was one in particular, big even for a Korath, named Vorgan. Loud, mean in that casual way some people are mean, the kind who picks targets the way you pick fruit, whatever's closest and easiest. And Vorgan had decided, somewhere along the way, that Ren was the easiest target in the whole class. It started small, knocking her tablet off her desk as he walked past, taking the seat she usually sat in just to watch her have to find another one. Little things, stupid things. And here's what got under his hide: Ren never reacted. She'd pick the tablet up. She'd find another seat. She wouldn't even look annoyed. She just absorbed it, like water taking a stone. And to a Korath, that's the most infuriating thing in the universe. They want you scared. They feed on the flinch, and she wouldn't give him one. So Vorgan pushed harder. I remember the day it nearly tipped over. We were in the training hall, doing zero-impact sparring drills, padded suits, no real danger, just learning footwork and reaction time. Partner work. And Vorgan made a point of grabbing Ren as his partner before she could pair with anyone else. A Korath and a human, 4 arms against 2, twice her mass. Everyone in the hall slowed down to watch because we all knew what Vorgan was planning. He was going to embarrass her, make her look small and weak in front of everyone so that the thing she did in combat theory would be forgotten, so the natural order, Korath strong, human weak, would be restored. The drill instructor blew the whistle. And Vorgan came in fast, too fast for a drill. He wasn't trying to teach footwork. He was trying to put her on the ground. Now, I've watched that moment 100 times in my memory, and I still can't break it down into normal pieces, because it didn't happen in normal pieces. Vorgan lunged. Ren wasn't there. That's the only way I can describe it. He committed his whole mass to the grab, and at the exact instant his hands closed, she just wasn't in that space anymore. She'd stepped, small, economical, half a pace and a turn, and Vorgan's own momentum carried him straight past her off balance, all 4 arms grabbing air. And she could have hit him. Everyone in that hall understood in that frozen second that she had a clear line to about 6 places on his body where a hit would have ended it. Throat, knee, the soft spot under a Korath's lower shoulder that they don't like to talk about. She didn't hit him. She just stepped back into a neutral stance, hands loose, and waited. Vorgan caught himself, spun around, furious, came again, same thing. She moved, he missed, she didn't capitalize, over and over, 5 times, 6. Each time he got angrier, and each time she just wasn't where his hands were, and each time she chose not to hurt him. And that's the part that scared me most, looking back. Not that she could avoid him, that she kept choosing not to win, like she was holding something on a leash, like she knew exactly how much damage she was capable of and was very, very carefully not doing it. The instructor finally blew the whistle to stop it, because Vorgan had completely lost the drill and was just swinging in rage by then. And as we filed out, I heard one of the Selv students murmur to another, in that cold, quiet way they have, "That was not luck, that was training." The other one answered, "That was more than training, look at her breathing, she is not even elevated." I looked, she was right. Ren had just spent 2 minutes dancing away from a furious Korath twice her size, and she was breathing like she'd been sitting in a chair. I went back to my dorm that night and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the scar on her wrist, and the way she watched every door, and the 4-minute meals, and the yellow strip on the floor of that battle recording that she'd seen and the rest of us hadn't. And I started to think, quietly, carefully, the way I think about everything, that the quiet girl in the corner was not who any of us thought she was. I had no idea how right I was, or how wrong, both at once. It came out by accident. Most big things do. It was a records glitch, of all things. The most boring possible cause for the most unbelievable possible discovery. The academy ran everything off a central system, grades, schedules, training logs, the works. And about 3 months into the term, the system did a routine sync with the wider Concord network. Pulled updated files. Cross-referenced student records against military and civilian databases, the way it was supposed to. And something flagged. I only know the details because Priya, the other human, the social one, was a teaching assistant for the records office that term. Part-time job. She handled filing mostly. Dull stuff. And she was there in the office the morning the flag came through. She told me about it later, months later, after everything. She told me because she needed to tell someone and I was the one who'd been watching, so I'd understand. Here's what happened. The system pulled Ren's student file to cross-reference it, standard, and the cross-reference came back with a match to a sealed military record, which shouldn't have been possible. Students don't have sealed military records. Students are kids. The records officer, a tired old Selv named Administrator Hesh, frowned at the screen. He figured it was an error. Same name, maybe, common human surname. He went to dismiss it. and the file wouldn't dismiss. It came back with an authorization lock, a high one, the kind of clearance level that an Academy Records office isn't supposed to be able to touch. There was a name attached to the lock, a Conquered Fleet Command authorization, and a single line of text that Hesh read out loud, confused, to Priya, because he didn't understand what he was looking at. The line said, "Subject is a verified combat asset. Record sealed by order of Fleet Command. Do not flag, do not discharge, do not transfer." Priya said Administrator Hesh just sat there, staring, and then he said very quietly, "There must be a mistake." And then he did the thing he should not have done. He opened the file. He had the clearance, barely. He was an administrator, and he was curious, and he was tired, and he made a decision that he'd regret, because some things you can't unknow. The file opened, and Priya, standing behind him, reading over his shoulder, saw the top of it before he could turn the screen away. She saw a name, Ren Calloway. She saw an image, a younger Ren, maybe 2 years younger, in a uniform Priya didn't recognize, with eyes that looked 100 years old. And she saw a header, a single line, big and official, at the top of a file that went on, scrolling down further than Priya could read before Hesh blanked the screen with a shaking hand. The header said, "Combat Record Classified KESSEL-9 Orbital Defense." And under it, a number. Priya said she only caught a glimpse of the number, a confirmed engagement count, the kind of number that goes next to the name of a veteran with 30 years of service. Ren was 17. Kessel 9. I have to stop here and tell you what Kessel 9 was, because if you don't know, the rest of this doesn't land. Kessel 9 was a colony world, far out on the rim, near the worst part of the front. 3 years before any of this, the Vass came for it. You've heard of last stands. Everyone's heard of last stands. Kessel 9 wasn't a last stand. It was a slaughter that turned into something else. The Vass hit the orbital defenses first, the way they always did. Smashed the fleet that was guarding the system. The Conquered could only spare a handful of ships, and those ships died in the first hours. The planet's evacuation began, but evacuating a whole colony takes days, and days were exactly what they didn't have. The Vass landed, and on the surface, what was left of the colony's defense forces had to hold the evacuation zones long enough for the transport ships to fill and lift and run. They were not soldiers, most of them. They were colonists, miners, farmers, engineers, kids old enough to hold a weapon, volunteers from the local militia who'd never fired a shot in anger. They held for 11 days. 11 days, against the Vass, with almost nothing. They held the zones, and they fell back, and they held again, and one by one the transports got away, and by the end, almost 200,000 civilians had been pulled off that planet alive, because a few thousand people with no business surviving refused to break. When the last transports lifted, the Conquered did what the Conquered does when a world is lost. They scoured it, orbital fire, to deny it to the Vass. The official count said there were no survivors among the defenders, that everyone who stayed to hold the line died holding it. The official count was wrong, because one of the last transports off Kessel 9 had a handful of defenders aboard, pulled out at the final hour against their will by a Conquered officer who refused to leave them to die. A few survivors, just a few. The Conquered buried that fact. It didn't fit the story. The story needed heroes who died. It didn't know what to do with heroes who lived. And the youngest of those survivors, 14 years old when the Vass came, 14 years old and standing in the line with a rifle that was too big for her, was a colonist girl from the mining district. Her name was Ren Calloway. So now you know what was sitting in the corner of my classroom, in the gray jacket, reading a tablet, eating in 4 minutes, watching every door. A survivor of Kessel 9. A kid who'd held a line at 14, that grown soldiers across the galaxy told stories about. And the Conquered, in its wisdom, had decided that the best thing for the survivors was to give them new lives, quiet ones. They sealed the records. They scattered the survivors to schools and colonies far from the front with clean files and fresh starts, and they told them, go be young, go be normal, you've done enough. That's why Wren was at the academy, not to become a soldier. She'd already been one. She was there because some part of the Conquered wanted to believe a teenager could unfight a war and just be a student. It doesn't work like that. Of course it doesn't. You don't unsee a door. You don't unlearn to eat fast. You don't unfeel the floor for the spot where the gravity's wrong. But she tried. God, she tried. The quiet, the corner, the gray jacket zipped to the chin. That was Wren trying as hard as she could to be a normal kid in a normal class. And we, all of us, the loud Korath and the cold Selv and the careful Athruni, we looked at her trying to be small, and we thought she was nothing. Priya didn't tell anyone. Not at first. She was too shaken. And Administrator Hesh, to his credit, sealed the file back up, marked the glitch as resolved, and told Priya to forget what she saw. But Priya couldn't forget. And the thing about a secret that big is that it changes the way you act around the person, even when you don't mean it to. Priya started being gentle with Wren, saving her a seat, bringing her things at meals, small kindnesses that came out of nowhere. And Wren noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything. That was the whole point of her. I watched it happen across about 2 weeks, watched Priya's sudden kindness, watched Wren's quiet, careful confusion, watched Wren start to realize that someone knew something. And then this is the part that breaks me a little. I watched Wren get scared. Not scared of danger. I don't think danger scared her anymore. She'd used that up. She got scared of being seen. Because the whole life she was trying to build depended on nobody knowing, on being the quiet girl in the corner. The moment we knew, she stopped being a student and went back to being the thing she was running from, a combat asset, a survivor, a story. I saw it in the way she started sitting even smaller, the way the gray jacket stayed, zipped even when the training halls got hot, the way she stopped answering in combat theory, even when Daku looked her way, hopping. She was trying to disappear again, trying to put the genie back in the box. And it might have worked. It might have all stayed buried. If the Vas hadn't come to Tarsus Reach. It was supposed to be impossible. That's what everyone said afterward, over and over, like saying it could undo it. It was supposed to be impossible. Tarsus Reach was deep inside conquered space, far from the front. The whole point of the academy being there was that it was safe. Safe enough to put children on. Safe enough that the deadliest thing most of us expected to face that year was a failed exam. But the Vas had learned. 9 years of war and they'd gotten smart. They'd found a gap. A patrol route that had thinned because every ship that could fight was needed at the front, and they sent something through it. Not a fleet, they couldn't get a fleet that deep. Something smaller, a raider group. Fast, brutal, suicidal. The kind of strike that isn't meant to win a war. The kind that's meant to make a point. To reach into the safe place and prove that nowhere is safe. They came in the night cycle. Station time, around the 3rd hour, when most of us were asleep. I woke up to the alarm. Not a drill alarm. We all knew the drill alarm by then, knew it in our bones, the steady rising tone that meant practice, get to your stations, well done, back to bed. This was not that. This was the other alarm, the one they'd played for us exactly once in our first week, so we'd know it if we ever heard it. A hard, flat, ugly sound. A sound with no rhythm. A sound that meant only one thing. Hull breach, hostile boarding, this is not a drill. I sat up in the dark and my whole body went cold. The careful Athruni body that had never in its life been in real danger. And I understood, in one horrible clear instant, that everything I'd been training for was about to stop being theory. The Vas were on the station. And in the corner of a dorm 3 doors down from mine, the quiet girl in the gray jacket opened her eyes. She did not panic. She did not freeze. While the rest of us lay paralyzed in our bunks, she was already moving. Because she'd heard that sound before. And she knew exactly what to do. I want to tell you what panic feels like, so you understand the rest of this. It feels like cold water poured down the inside of your skin. Your hands stop being yours. Your ears ring. Your brain keeps trying to tell you it's a dream, that the alarm will stop, that someone will laugh and say it was a test. That's where I was, sitting up in my bunk in the dark. That ugly flat alarm hammering the air. The red emergency lights washing the dorm in a color that made everything look like a wound. The VAS were on the station, and I couldn't move. I wasn't the only one. I could hear it through the walls, kids crying, kids shouting, somebody being sick, somebody praying in a language I didn't know. 43 of us, 11 worlds, all the training in the galaxy, and most of us just lay there and shook. 3 doors down, one of us got up. I didn't see the first part myself. I pieced it together later, from Priya, from the corridor cameras the investigators reviewed, from the handful of others who were awake enough to see. Ren got out of her bunk before the alarm finished its first cycle. She didn't dress in a panic. She dressed fast and clean, the way you do a thing you've done 1,000 times. Boots, jacket. She pulled her hair back without a mirror, and then she did something the cameras caught that nobody understood until afterward. She went to the emergency locker in the dorm corridor, the one with the fire suppression gear and the medical kit, and the single sidearm that regulations required every dorm section to have, sealed behind a panel that only opened in a real emergency. The panel was already glowing green. The station had unlocked it the second the boarding alarm went live. Ren took the sidearm, checked it, checked the charge, the safety, the seating of the cell, all in about 3 seconds, her hands moving like they belonged to someone much older. Then she clipped the medical kit to her belt. And then, this is the part. She did not run for the evacuation muster point like the protocol said. She turned and went toward the breach. Here's what was happening that she already understood, and the rest of us didn't. The VAS raiders had punched through the hull 2 sections over, near the docking ring. They were a small force, maybe 20 of them. But 20 VAS in a station full of unarmed students and teachers is not a fight. It's a harvest. And they weren't there to take the station. You can't hold a station with 20 bodies. They were there to do the maximum damage in the minimum time and die doing it. That was the whole point of the raid. Kill as many as possible. Make the conquered bleed where it thought it was safe. Make a headline out of dead children. The fastest way to do that was to get to the dormitory sections, which meant the VAS were coming straight for us, and between them and 400 sleeping students was exactly one thing. A corridor, the main connecting corridor of dorm block C, long, straight, one way in from the breach side, one way out to the muster points. And one person, walking calmly toward it, in a gray jacket with a borrowed sidearm and a medkit. The station's defense force was scrambling. They were good, conquered security, real soldiers, but they were spread thin across a station that size, and they were minutes away. Minutes. In a boarding action, a minute is a geological age. People die by the dozen in the time it takes help to arrive. Ren knew that too. She'd done the math the second she heard the alarm. Help is coming. Help is too slow. The line has to hold until help gets here. That equation. She knew that equation in her bones because she'd solved it once before on a dying world when she was 14. So she found the spot. The corridor had a natural choke point about 2/3 of the way down, a junction where the wide hall narrowed to pass between 2 structural pillars, with maintenance alcoves set into the walls on either side. Anyone coming from the breach had to funnel through that gap. 2, maybe 3 abreast. No more. She took position in one of the alcoves, out of the line of sight from the breach side, back to solid metal, eyes on the gap. And she waited. I keep coming back to that. She waited. Alone. In the dark and the red light and the screaming alarm, a 17-year-old girl pressed her back to a wall and waited for the Vass to come to her, because that was the spot where the corridor would do half her work for her. The yellow strip, the damaged plating, the thing she'd seen in a battle recording that the rest of us missed. She didn't just understand tactics, she lived in them. She saw rooms the way the rest of us see faces. I was still in my bunk when the shooting started. You don't forget that sound. Vast weapons make a wet, snapping crack like something breaking that shouldn't break, and under it the cleaner hiss of a conquered sidearm. The two sounds talking back and forth. Crack, hiss, crack, crack, hiss. It went on longer than it should have. That's what I remember thinking lying there. Why is it still going? 20 Vass against one sidearm should last about 4 seconds. It lasted minutes. It lasted long enough that I finally forced my body to move and crawled to the dorm door and cracked it open and looked down the corridor toward the noise. I will see that for the rest of my life. The corridor was full of smoke and red light. At the far choke point, I could see shapes moving the Vass, awful and fast, pouring through the gap. And I could see her. She wasn't standing in the open trading shots. That's the thing nobody pictures right. She wasn't a hero in a doorway blazing away. She was barely visible, a flicker. She'd lean out of the alcove for a fraction of a second, fire, and be gone before the Vass could fix on where she was. The wall ate their return fire, sparks, scorch marks, and she'd appear on the other side of the alcove, a step she shouldn't have had time to take, fire again, vanish again. She was making 20 enemies fight her one at a time, funneling them into the gap where only 2 or 3 could come at once, and dropping them as they crossed it, and never being where their guns expected her to be. It was the sparring drill with Vorgan. The exact same thing, not where the hands are, except now it wasn't a drill and she wasn't holding back, and every economical little movement ended a life. I counted 6 Vass down in the time I watched, 6, and she hadn't been touched. But she was running out of the thing that even she couldn't beat, numbers and ammunition. Here's where it nearly went wrong. A Vass got smart. One of them stopped charging the gap and instead climbed. They can do that. They've got the limbs for it, climbed up into the ceiling supports and started moving along the top of the corridor, above her line of sight, to come down behind the alcove, to get on her flank. The one angle the choke point didn't cover. She didn't see it. For the first time, the room had a card she hadn't counted. I saw it, from the dorm door. I saw the Vass crawling along the ceiling toward the spot above her, and I opened my mouth to shout, and nothing came out, because I was a careful Othruni who had never been in danger and my body had betrayed me completely. But someone else saw it too. Vorgan. The big Korath, the bully. He'd been in the dorm across from mine and he'd cracked his door same as me, and he saw the same thing I saw, the Vass on the ceiling, Ren about to be flanked. And the loud, mean, casual bully, the one who'd spent 3 months trying to make her flinch, did the bravest stupid thing I've ever seen anyone do. He charged. No weapon. Nothing. 4 arms and 10,000 years of warrior tradition and a body twice the size of a human. Vorgan came roaring out of his dorm and down that corridor straight at the choke point, screaming a Korath battle cry that probably hadn't been screamed for real in 100 years. The Vass on the ceiling turned toward the noise, just for a second, just long enough. And Ren, who heard the cry, who understood in an instant what it meant, who saw the flanker reveal itself when it turned, Ren spun, found the angle and fired once. The flanker fell out of the ceiling, dead before it hit the deck. And then there were 2 of them in that corridor holding the line. A human girl and the Korath who'd bullied her, fighting back to back. And I swear I will never understand the universe, because that should not have happened and it did. Vorgan wasn't a soldier. He was strong and brave and completely untrained for this, and within seconds a Vass was on him, and he was in trouble grappling, all 4 arms locked up, snarling, losing. Ren moved. She crossed the gap to him faster than I could track. She didn't try to wrestle the vase off. She was a third its size. She'd have lost that. Instead, she put the sidearm against the one spot on a vast body that ends them clean. The spot she knew because she'd learned it the worst way there is, and she ended it. Vorgan staggered free. And for 1 second the two of them stood there, the bully and the girl he'd tormented, both breathing hard, both alive, looking at each other. And Vorgan, I heard this part later, he told it himself. Told it to anyone who'd listen for the rest of the year. Vorgan said, "What are you?" And Ren, reloading her last charged cell with hands that didn't shake, said, "Tired, get behind me." And he did. The proudest Korath I ever met got behind a human girl and let her hold the line, because in that corridor, in that red light, rank and species and 10,000 years of tradition meant nothing at all. There was only who knew how to keep people alive. And she did. And he knew it. They held for 90 more seconds. 90 seconds doesn't sound like much. Sit somewhere quiet and count it out. 1, 2, 3, it's forever. It's a lifetime 90 times over. They held it. Her firing, him shielding. The two of them giving ground one careful step at a time. Never breaking, never running, while behind them 400 kids who'd thought she was nothing slept on or cowered in the dark and stayed alive because of her. And then the corridor lights flickered white, conquered security override, and the breach end of the hall filled with the clean roar of real soldiers arriving in force, and the surviving vast turned to face the new threat, and it was over. Fast. The way it should have been from the start. The professionals poured in, and the last of the raiders went down, and the alarm finally changed its tone to the long, steady note that means secure. Silence, smoke, red light fading back to white. And in the middle of the corridor, surrounded by the bodies of things that had come to murder children, a small girl in a scorched gray jacket lowered her empty sidearm and sat down on the deck, very slowly, like all the strings holding her up had been cut at once. She didn't celebrate. She didn't say anything heroic. She just sat there on the floor in the quiet with her arms around her knees. Vorgan stood next to her, guarding her, daring anyone with all 4 arms to come near her wrong. Nobody did. The medics came, the security officers came, and then the questions came because the questions always come. How did a student do this? Who was she? Where did she learn it? I was there when they pulled up her file, really pulled it up this time. Command authorization and all, in the bright bleak light of the station infirmary, with Ren sitting on a cot wrapped in a thermal blanket, that 1,000-year-old look back in her 17-year-old eyes. The security captain read the file, and I watched a hardened, conquered officer go pale. I watched him close the file and stand up straighter and do something I didn't understand at first. He saluted her. A captain saluting a student. And then I understood because I'd heard the name in the file, the same name Priya had glimpsed months before. Kessel 9. The captain knew what that meant. Every soldier in the Concord knew what that meant. He'd probably told the story himself in some barracks somewhere about the colonists who held for 11 days, about the line that wouldn't break. He just never expected the line to be sitting on a cot in a thermal blanket, 17 years old, having just held another one. The secret was out now. There was no putting it back. By morning, the whole academy knew. By the next day, half the Concord knew. The Concord tried to keep it quiet, old habits, but a story like that doesn't stay buried. The girl who survived Kessel 9, the quiet one in the corner, who walked toward the breach when everyone else froze. And here's the thing I want you to sit with, the thing I still think about. She didn't want it. She didn't want the story, or the salute, or the kids who suddenly wanted to sit at her table, or the teachers who looked at her differently, or the message that came through from Fleet Command itself. All she'd ever wanted was the corner seat by the window and the gray jacket, and the chance to be a normal kid who'd never seen a world die. We took that from her, by knowing, by seeing. But we gave her something back, too, I want to believe that. Because the next time Ren walked into combat theory, she didn't sit in the corner. Vorgan had saved her a seat, in the middle, with the rest of us, and he'd put his big four-armed bulk in the seat behind it so her back would be covered, so she wouldn't have to watch the door anymore, because now there were 42 people who would watch it for her. She sat down, slowly, carefully, like she wasn't sure the chair was real. And then she did something none of us had ever seen her do. She let her shoulders down, just a little, the smallest thing, the kind of thing you'd never notice unless you'd spent 3 months watching The Careful Athruni Way. For the first time since I'd known her, Ren stopped getting ready to run. I left the academy 2 years later. We all did, the ones who made it through. Scattered to the fleet, to the front, to the long grinding war that last I heard, the conquered is finally, slowly winning. I never became a great soldier. I'm still Athruni, still careful, still measure things twice. But I'm braver than I was, and I know exactly where that came from, and her name was Ren. People ask me sometimes when they hear I was there, when they hear I knew her, they ask what the secret was. The combat record, the thing that shocked everyone. They want the number, the engagement count, the classified header. They want the part that sounds like a legend. And I tell them they're asking the wrong question. The secret wasn't that she could fight. Lots of people can fight. The secret was that she'd already paid for all of us once on a world that burned, and she'd come to that classroom hopping to never pay again. And when the bill came due anyway, when the alarm screamed in the dark and 43 of us froze, she didn't hesitate. She got up. She walked toward the worst of it, not because she wasn't afraid. Because she'd learned, on Kessel 9, that being afraid and going anyway is the only thing that's ever held a line. That was the secret of the quiet girl in the corner. She wasn't quiet because she had nothing to say. She was quiet because she already knew what the rest of us were only just finding out. That the universe is dark and cold and full of things that come for the people you love in the middle of the night. And that the only light there's ever been against any of it is somebody small and scared and tired, choosing to stand in the gap anyway.